Good morning everybody and welcome to our first recorded workshop here for the Rewild members. So this is the first spring workshop that I'm recording for you, and I'm going to quickly run through here in the kitchen what we're going to cover. Then we're going to get out to the forest and do some foraging for ingredients, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to show you how to process the things that we're foraging and how to make some of the wonderful things that I'm enjoying making this year. Every year I make different things, there's endless amounts of things to make, so let's start this year with some really basic but very delicious, simple, fabulous recipes that are going to take the spring flavours all the way through the year if you make enough of them. So the wild garlic season is coming to an end at the moment, so now is the time to really think about harvesting and storing and preparing and keeping some of that gorgeous flavour all the way through the year. Wild garlic isn't just delicious, it's a blood purifier, so that's a really, really good medicine to have in our diets. So one of my favourite ways to preserve the wild garlic at this time of year is to add it to salt. So here we have my jar of the wild garlic salt, and I'm going to teach you how to make this today. It is pretty impressive stuff when you add it to a dish. The flavour is fabulous, and it's a really simple recipe to get right and to make, and you're going to create quite a lot of it. It's going to last you at least a year. So to create this recipe, you're going to want to get yourself some of the Malden sea salt flakes, beautiful quality sea salt, and this is just the perfect thing for this recipe. So one of these packets makes a jar like this, that's 250 grams of salt. I've also managed to fill a tub here, so it's not quite a full jar. So these little tins I've created because when I'm out and about in the forest cooking, I usually have a little jar, I don't think it's round, of salt and pepper, and I thought, well, it would be nice to have a different flavour this year. So I've created some wild garlic salt tins, which I'm sure you can see. And the smell is absolutely divine. It's really capturing walking into a forest and the floor being full of wild garlic. It just smells like heaven. And this is beautiful, added to dishes, added to your cooking. It's really, really lovely on, quite frankly, everything. So it's a good one to get making. I'm looking forward to teaching you this later. Another recipe that I've really enjoyed making lately is my primrose syrup. So if you gather some flowers and create a syrup from them, this is going to be a lovely addition to gin this year, or anything that I might want to put that beautiful, gentle flavour of primrose into. To create this is very simple. We make a simple syrup, which is always 1 part sugar to 1 part water. So for this, I filled with water. I then tipped it into a measuring jug, and you take that exact measurement in ml over to G. So for instance, if this was 200 ml of water, I would then use 200 ml of water with 200 grams of sugar to create a light syrup. And then we use flowers. So the flowers do not need to be in any part to your syrup, as I've seen some people mention. That's not actually how it works. You could have very few flowers if you want a gentle flavour. You could go really hard and put lots and lots and lots of primrose in there if you want a more densely flavoured syrup. The part you need to get right is the 1:1 ratio on your syrup. And of course you're not going to boil it I usually bring mine to the boil and then stop there, because the more you boil it, the thicker the syrup becomes. And it's very easy to turn it into jelly or jam. So we don't want to go down that route. We want a nice light syrup. Also, when in making syrups, it's really important to understand, the same as when you make a cup of tea, you don't boil a tea bag to death to get the flavour out. That's not how syrups work. So what we want to do is create the syrup, get it up to the boil, then pop our botanical ingredients into our syrup and leave it to cool, or put it on a very gentle simmer for 5 or 10 minutes. Because we're extracting a delicate flavour, we don't want to decoct the flavour. If you go too hard on boiling out flavours, some things are going to taste very bitter at the end or quite off-key. So that's a simple syrup that I hope that you all have a go at making. I've done mine, so I'm probably not going to forage any more primrose. I've got quite a lovely substantial stash for the year, so we won't be making this today, but I will make another syrup with you in this video to help you just see the process as we go through. So you've probably seen for yourselves that the magnolia trees have been in full bloom lately. Some are still coming into bud, so it depends on where you're based in the country. Even locally, some of the trees are finished while some are still just starting to get going. Magnolia is a delicious flavour, And if you like things like Turkish Delight, which have got that kind of strong floral rose flavour, Magnolia is probably going to be for you. But it's a slightly more spicy flavour, and I think it's just superior to any other floral taste. And there are 3 ways that we can use Magnolia. For a simple salad ingredient, we can add our Magnolia into some vinegars. You could use any type of vinegar. I'd avoid the strong malt vinegar. I've used red wine vinegar for mine. Some people like to sweeten it with some sugar, some brown sugar, maybe spice it in some way with allspice, cinnamon, that kind of thing. Or you can just leave it plain. I've left mine plain. You could also add peppercorns and so on and so forth. You can really make the recipe your own. I simply put some petals into the red wine vinegar, and I'm just going to leave that in my fridge now. And when I make some beautiful salads this year, I'll be able to just add a few additions of the Magnolia petals for extra interesting flavour. Another fabulous way of using the Magnolia is to actually strip out the petals, pop them on a drying rack or a dehydrator, and let them dry out. It takes a few days, and all Magnolia, no matter how beautiful they begin, even if they're vibrant and pink and purple, they will kind of dry with their flavour, but as you get to the nitty-gritty end part, they do all go a very beautiful rustic orange. So the Magnolia, once it's dried out, can be ground down, and we will do that later on in this video. I'll just pop it into my Vitamix, give it a blitz, and it's going to go into a jar as a fabulous spice. It's a lovely natural flavour that we can add to cakes or anything that we might want to give that kind of cardamom-y. I don't know how to describe it. People want to say ginger and cardamom. I just think it smells like Magnolia. We'll get that powdered down, and then we've got a nice addition for cooking ingredients later this year. My favourite way to prepare Magnolia by far is very indulgent and super delicious, and I've got to stop eating it before I use it. So here we have the absolutely beautiful jar of the most delicious Magnolia syrup. So the way that I created this is I took the very best buds that I had gathered, and you just chop the end of the bud off, give it a tap, and all of the seed pod just falls out, and then you're left with the beautiful little cone-like petal buds. And I popped those all into my jar. All of the petals that were extra or that I'd peeled off to get the very best buds, I then used in the same recipe for syrup as I've just explained to you, with those petals in. And once I'd finished making the syrup, I poured it over the buds that I'd popped into the jar. I then took those petals from the syrup and just topped the jar. So at the top of the jar, you actually have the loose petals in the syrup. There's some beautiful Magnolia syrup, and then the real treats are the big syruped buds. This is going to be something I'm probably going to have every day on pancakes and ice cream and everything you can imagine, and at the end of it I will be left with this delicious syrup, which will probably find its way into many cocktails this summer. Really easy, you must try it. If you've got Magnolia buds around, definitely harvest some and get making it. So moving on, this is my jar here, filled with red wine vinegar this time, and what you can see inside infusing are actually wild garlic buds, and these are the beautiful little buds that will burst into white flower when we get the forest floor carpeted in white, which I'm hoping is not how we're going to find it this morning, because if we have, we're too late, but I'm pretty sure we're okay. So while we're out in the forest this morning, we're going to look for the buds as well as the leaves of the wild garlic. I like to collect these mindfully, slowly into a separate bowl. Foraging wild garlic can be quite hazardous, so we're going to do it in a very slow way today. We're not just going out and grabbing handfuls. That's very bad for the environment, but it's also a dangerous and disrespectful practice. So what we want to do is select each leaf one by one. That's the true essence of what we're doing. The same with the little caper buds. And then when we get home, it's a lot easier to work with, and we know we haven't been out and desecrated some part of the wild world. So these are just sitting in here in this red wine vinegar at the moment. Again, these are going to be a beautiful addition to salads. I'm also going to finish topping this up with some dandelion buds, which are the tiny buds before it flowers. And if you pick those little buds and pop them in here with the wild garlic buds, of course wash both first, you will end up with some really interesting wild caper-like salad additions. I make them every year and they last all year, and I just love them. They just give such a nice kick to a salad, regardless of the time of year. So the next thing that I'm going to look for while we're out foraging this morning, and it's something you've probably seen me use in a lot of my videos, and that's woodhaven root. Woodhaven root contains eugenol, which is actually the same chemical compound that you will find in cloves, which is why this is also known as clove root. And there is just such a beautiful smell. It is really, really lovely. It's not really as strong as clove. It's got a much more delicate flavour. And as somebody who doesn't actually like cloves, I love woodhaven. So the best time to gather the roots would obviously be in the autumn when the plant's dormant and its energy is hiding in the roots. You want to definitely catch them before they burst into flower this year. If you catch them now, you can certainly still harvest the roots. And all I've done here is simply washed the plant, chopped off the root part. They're now sap drying out, and when we come back later, I will just blend these down into a powder and they'll be going into lots of my recipes. So while we're out in the forest, I'll be sure to show you the woodhaven and we'll collect one. So in this basket here, I have bramble shoots all drying. And the blackberry or bramble bush shoots are absolutely packed with vitamin C and make a really lovely little herbal tea. I now have those dried out and they're ready for me to get storing away, and this is just for a really healthy cup of tea. So again, if you see some bramble shoots, just pluck the little green shoots, gather a basket, get them drying, and you'll have a fabulous supply of tea. And again, of course, we're not going to boil it to death. We're going to boil our water like a normal cup of tea. We're going to add a teaspoon of the herb and let it simply infuse, strain, and then you're going to have something that's got a nice amount of vitamin C in for you and bring you some health benefits straight from spring. So the last thing on my table that I'm going to show you this morning, this is my beautiful big basket of fresh forest spring nettle tips. Every year I make a point of collecting lots of spring nettle tips because I'm forever using nettle in my recipes. I love it as tea. It's an incredible superfood packed with so many nutrients and health benefits. The iron content alone as a woman is super useful. So, you know, if you're wanting to stabilise your iron levels, etc., I highly recommend nettle, but it is just a very strengthening plant and incredibly good for you, and there's no better nettle than the spring nettle tips. And this is from such a beautiful place in the forest. I really don't find better quality nettle than deep in the forest, far away from the world. So that's what's drying in here. So let's go to the forest, let's see what we can find, then we'll come back here this afternoon and I will shoot everything for you and get it into a video, and I hope that you enjoy this. I hope it tells you all you need to know to get outside and start making some wonderful ingredients and start gathering herbs and storing them for the year, because you mustn't miss spring. Spring is only here once a year and it's got so much goodness in everything with the spring. So many wonderful flavours and so many healing benefits. So let's get busy before we miss the whole of spring and the next flush comes. So let's go and find these wild ingredients and get making all the wonderful things that we've talked about. Okay guys, so we're out here now in the forest and the woodland, and there's lots of beautiful, lovely, fresh spring ingredients everywhere. So I'm going to start collecting what we were just talking about in my kitchen. And I love coming right into the heart of this private, lovely, beautiful place to get the freshest ingredients. And looking around me, you can see lots of the toxic or the poisonous dog's mercury. This is a plant that we don't eat. And we've also got lots and lots of beautiful spring nettle tips. So I'm going to get harvesting now. So if we come down and we start to have a look through the plants, the nettle is doing really well at the moment, and you can see she's really starting to take some height. And what we're going to be harvesting for nettle tips is literally this top tip here. You can take these two larger ones, but I like to actually just take this tip here, which is the youngest shoot of the plant, and And the reason I want this part is because it's going to have the most vitality. They're the freshest, the healthiest part of the plant at this point, and they're full of lovely nutrition and flavour. So collecting the spring nettle tips, it's just this little section here at the top that I want to be pinching off. As always, you should be super mindful, because obviously this is growing right amongst something that is extremely dangerous for us. So just take the time just to select what you want to pick, make sure that you've got it. And I always choose really beautiful specimen plants, no holes, no frostbite. They're just really beautiful looking plants. And I'm making sure that I haven't got any little pieces of the dog mercury going into the basket. And that's really important for your safety. So here we are, surrounded by some lovely wild garlic. I love the stuff that grows out in the forest, far away from everyone. And there's two parts, of course, that we're going to be collecting today. So the parts that we're going to be collecting, of course, are the leaves, and we're going to look for the mature leaves, A for safety, B for flavour. Okay, so here we go with some beautiful wild garlic, and it's all grown now. The smell is fabulous, and it's a very distinct plant and a very distinct smell. So what we want to do when we want to pick them, we want to choose a nice leaf, make sure it's in great condition, and yes, be this selective, take one at a time. Don't be somebody that goes into a forest grabbing handfuls. A, because you'll probably kill yourself, because it will take one leaf of something dangerous, and B, it's just such a horrible thing to do to nature. Just take a few from the plants around you. So I will go through looking for the nicest leaves, and if you come and have a look here, you'll see what I mean by the nicest leaves. This leaf, I wouldn't want to be eating this one. I'm happy to leave this one here, but the one next door is actually very beautiful, very good condition. I always want to know that I'm eating the best quality foods. So it's really nice to take the time and select what you want to eat, just as you would do with any of your foods. If I'd have just grabbed all of those, I would have probably thrown a lot of them out, so it's nice not to have done that. So that's the leaves, and for the wild garlic recipe, if you're only collecting for that recipe, I want you to collect a bunch. So when you put your hands together in a zero as such, fill it with wild garlic, and that will be a really good quantity, not too little and not too much, to make a really beautiful vibrant green garlic salt. The second part of the wild garlic that we're collecting today. Okay, so when we come down and look at the forest floor, you're going to see these little fellas, and these are going to turn into the beautiful white garlic flowers soon. So we just pick one off. I try and get as much of the stalk off as possible when I pick, and I collect these into a separate container so that when I get home they're easy just to rinse off and pop into my red wine vinegar. So let's get collecting. So I did mention to you earlier that I had been collecting the shoots of the blackberry, the bramble bush, and that's because they're super packed full of vitamin C, and they're a really nice ingredient to collect for tea. So here we are in the forest, and we have a runner, one of the Bramble Runners here, And as you can see, you've got the old leaves from last year, and then you have these very vibrant, very individual young shoots coming off. And at this stage, they do have prickles, but they're still soft. So they shouldn't hurt you at all to actually forage them. Although wear gloves because the rest of the bramble is actually quite spiky. So what you want to do is just find the shoot on the plant and just pluck it off. And there you have one of the bramble shoots. And just work your way along a few of the stems. It's a very abundant plant. You're not going to do nature any harm by collecting some. Dry them out and you can have them as a beautiful tea. So this is a wood avon here, and this would be a really good one to get for its root because it's quite a large plant. They do grow along rhizomes under the soil. So if you look for one that's, I mean, this has got quite a nice thick part here, which means that when you pull out for its root, it should technically have quite a nice size root. And it's also the little skinny roots that we're looking for. So we shake that off. There we go, perfect. So we will cut it off at the green parts, and then it's all of these tiny little roots that hold all of the flavour, and they're the parts that we're going to dry out, and I'm going to blend mine up later on. So I shall now have to take this one home and get this one into my kitchen. There's another one, see? It's growing along the same rhizome. There's another one. It's not got so much going on with it. I'll put that one back in. Here's another one. So there's some nice little bits of root there. And just to ID this plant one more time, I know we've done this before on my channel, but just to ID this plant, you're looking for this definite 3 at the top here, and then they come down in pairs down to the root. So here's a leaf for you to get familiar with. Okay, so if you've got those doubles coming down, if you want to double check the ID, smell the root, it should smell like clove, and you'll know that you're onto the right track. There we go. Beautiful wood avon roots. Let's go home, get these washed, dried out, and I can blend up my already dried ones to show you how to make this beautiful old ancient spice. So we're back in my kitchen. I had a lovely time staying in the forest. It was really beautiful, very calming, good medicine. I hope that you're going to get out and enjoy hopefully lots of warm sunshine this weekend, the end of the school holiday too. So in my basket I've got all of my wild garlic, and I'm really happy that I know this is all wild garlic because I took the time to be careful when I was picking it originally in nature. I'm going to transfer that all over into my colander now. This is my last chance, just have a quick double check, make sure there is absolutely nothing in here I don't want. See, we have a twig. And now what I'm going to do is take my wild garlic and give it a very good rinse. Okay, so I've got my wild garlic here, freshly washed. Now to make the wild garlic salt, we're using the 250-gram packet of sea salt flakes by Maldon's. So I suggest that you use, like I said in the video earlier, about an O size of your hand, so that I'd class that as a bunch of wild garlic, and I think you'll find that will be more than enough to create a delicious meal. So I have actually got another one here which I'm going to put to one side, and I'm going to actually have a go at fermenting this later, but I'm not going to put that in this video. I may come back and do a separate video on that, so I'm going to save that for later on. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take that handful of wild garlic and I'm just popping that into my food processor here, and we are going to blitz it into a beautiful green, nice finely chopped herb. Okay, so we've now blitzed that in the food processor, so it is now a lovely blended green herb. So we're going to take that herb and we're going to pop that into a big glass bowl like so. Make sure we get it all out. So this is a good time to get your oven on and put it onto its top temperature, really fire it up. So let's add those sea salt flakes. Okay, so now we have the beautiful wild garlic and the salt in the bowl, and we're just going to take some time to combine those together. And you will notice not only a beautiful smell, but a very beautiful colour green. It really, really, really infuses beautifully with the salt. I do take just a little bit of extra time just to really mix it up. I like to know that that salt is well mixed with the garlic. We're going to place the salt mixture onto some baking paper on a tray. And just spread that as thinly as you can. And again, I try to take the time here just to make sure it's all level and even. You don't want to end up with any brown bits. So the method I'm using here, we've got the oven roaring away behind me, and what I'm going to do is as soon as I'm going to put this into the oven's going off, and they will be drying out as the oven cools. This will avoid burning any of it, and you may find you'll need to do that process 3 or 4 times, and each time you take the garlic out, so you take the salt garlic out of the oven, you want to just fluff through it with a fork, separate it, make it all upside down, give it some sort of chance to keep letting all the moisture out of the mixture. So while you're fluffing it with your fork, you can put your oven back on full whack, and then when the garlic goes back in, remember to turn the oven off and let it dry as the oven's cooling down. So like I say, 3 or 4 times usually is about where I'm happy that it's dried out enough. There's not really any steam coming off, and at that point I'm happy to jar so that we don't end up with any kind of mould or anything going nasty. So I'm happy with that. That's going in to my oven. I'm going to turn the heat off, and as the oven's cooling it will start to dry out the beautiful garlic salt. So now I'm going to process my dried magnolia petals and buds. So they've been drying for about a week now. They're crispy, they're perfect, they're absolutely perfect for storing. So I've got a Vitamix here. Is it Vitamix? I have a NutriBullet. So same sort of thing. Food processor will work. Pop the blade on, herbs in there, and then we want to get it to a nice fine spice. So think about something like cinnamon, that kind of texture. Incredible. Wow, just wow. If you think spices and so on are nice from shops, you should really try to make your own. It's really something that's quite incredible. That's quite a large basket, and that's how much I've got. So it kind of gives you an idea of, you know, it's a labour of love. I always say making your own spices, flowers, these kinds of things, they are labours of love, but my goodness, I can't wait to incorporate that into something that I'm going to be making soon. Now I'm going to process all the wild garlic flower buds that I collected today. So again, because I've taken the time to collect them carefully, I have my ingredients all sorted and lovely. The only thing I might want to do here is just remove the stalks. If they're a little bit long, there's a tiny little leaf, another tiny leaf. Just double check in here. We're just going to get off the long stalks, not for any reason really, other than I just like it all to be the same and pretty. Now, once I'm happy that those are all looking exactly how I would like them to look, I'm going to quickly rinse these in a sieve, and then we're going to get them into the jar with the vinegar. So I've washed those now, and I'm actually going to pop these ones into a new jar because I am definitely needing a bigger jar at this point. I'm probably going to stop collecting these this year. Famous last words. Because I need to focus on the dandelion caper side of this dish. And it's easy to get very carried away with these because you're constantly up against the clock with nature, but then the same for the dandelions right now. They won't be around for long. So if you want to catch the buds, I really recommend this weekend, maybe next weekend max, before all the dandelions have been and gone, and they just come in a flash and disappear just as fast as they arrived. Right, I'm just going to transfer all of these over. I'm not sure I'm going to have room for my buds in here. It's all good though. It's going to be a wonderful big jar of wonderful flavours. Let's transport the rest over. I'm just going to press those under, as far under as I can. I'm also just going to top up the jar with some extra vinegar. There we go. And that's going in the fridge now, and I think my dandelions, there's a little bit of room to squeeze them in. I can see this turning into 2 bigger jars, to be honest with you. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is, it's a bit of an experiment, like a good experiment. I have got some cherry blossom here that I picked yesterday that's actually dried out in a day. So I have that, and I actually have some flowering currants, which I also picked a couple of days ago now. And it has just dried out beautifully. I don't see that there should be any problem when you're drying flowers for syrups, because again, we make beautiful herbal teas from dried herbs all the time. So let's start the process. I'm going to fill this with water and then measure how much is in there. I'm going to need my scales for this, and if I pop that on there. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to find out how much water is in here. So that is 250 ml of water, which means I will want 250 grams. Let's tear that again. 250 grams of sugar. Okay. So to make that basic syrup, we want to add the sugar and water together, and we're going to just bring that up to the boil. And while we're doing that, I'm just going to double check what I'm putting in there. So I've already pulled off all of the little cherry blossoms. I've tried to remove any woody parts, so there is just the blossom going in there. And I'm going to add to that, so not making a great deal of this. I'm using quite a lot of flowers, so this could go one of 2 ways. It's all about experimenting. That's the fun of this. If it were delicious but just a bit too strong, obviously I could then make another batch of just the syrup water and mix this in and create a dilution between 2 bigger bottles or 1 bigger bottle. I'm going to take off the flowering part of this red flowering currant. Although the leaves smell really beautiful, I don't want to be adding those into my syrup. They're just a little bit too funky for my liking. I just go with florals only on this occasion. So my sugar and water have just boiled. So I'm not going to boil this any further, but I am going to just make sure the sugar has dispersed and is dissolved. And then I'm going to go for all of this. I have no idea how this is going to come out. I like to experiment with flavours, especially if there's gin involved at the end of that process. So that is in there, and it's looking very beautiful. First impressions, actually really interesting, really nice, really interesting smell. So I'm going to pop that now actually on a low simmer, probably just for 3 to 5 minutes, nothing more. And then I'm going to actually let it just cool down while it's drawing out all of those sweet floral flavours. And then we shall be on to the straining and tasting session. Okay, so let's just finish up. We are going to take the wood avonry, which has been drying out for a time now, and I'm going to use my NutriBlitz. Where is my, yes. And we're going to blitz that up. Right, I am actually going to sieve this because I like this to be a really fine spice. Obviously it's a woody root, so you don't want to be eating big chunks of it, whereas the magnolia petals, they were slightly more edible if you should stumble upon a larger piece. So let's just quickly tap that through the sieve. And this is my spring wood avon, so I've got autumn and spring, and it'll be interesting to experience the difference between the 2 seasons. It's definitely lighter. but the smell is actually strangely more intense in a good way. So that's interesting. Really smoky is the way I would describe it actually. That's very interesting. I might just blitz those last few pieces and see if I can get those down too. Okay, so there we have my spring woodhaven roots ready for dishes to come. That is such a beautiful smell. Okay, so I've finished straining the syrup and I can confirm I've had a little teaspoon. It's absolutely beautiful and really, really interesting flavour. Also, the colour is beautiful. You've got that lovely deep purpley red. Sadly, it's a bit too dark in here to see that, but it's kept its colour beautifully well. So it's really nice, like Ribena colour. Going into some gin recipes, I'm really excited about this one. And that was just the flowering red currant and cherry blossom. So it's late here and I'm all finished for you. I think we've covered everything. I just have to get the garlic sauce out of the oven. I will give you a quick update. It does smell truly, truly beautiful. And if you listen, you've got a real sort of glass sound. That's a really good indication that we're dried out. I'm gonna let this sit overnight. I'll be bottling the rest up tomorrow. So I hope you enjoyed this first workshop and I look forward to any comments that you have below. I hope that you try these recipes and I hope that you enjoy making them. So I will see you soon with some new ideas and some new things to forage. Take care.